To see how I can get your daddy to pick you up by tomorrow. Huh? I'm trying to see how I can get your I'm trying to see how I can get your daddy to pick you up by tomorrow. Hell, I'm trying to do it.
As I come through, I let that chopper off. Pow! Pow! That's not a chopper sound. I'm sorry. As soon as I come through, I kill everybody. We killing one person. No, we kill everybody. When I'm in the club, I make it rain. I'm gonna paint that. Come here.
You notice any previous issues at the home?
No. Just screaming. She was just screaming. And I hear boom, 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 boom. Like, I hear fire.
I heard 5 gunshots, and I knew something terrible had happened. Boom, 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 boom. On a warm September night in Galveston, Texas, a 16-year-old girl walked into her home, and what happened next stunned an entire community.
A child is troubled, then a child is troubled. You can only help them so much. I was so mad at first, but as I got to talking to people and actually just thinking about what might have really happened, or mental health is real. It's gonna take me a lifetime to get over this.
Inside this house, officers found a mother, barely holding on. Her body is motionless. Tiamoya Moore shot multiple times, and the only person believed to be involved, her 16-year-old daughter, was gone. No one knew where she went, or why the night exploded into violence. Someone whispers, "She ran. She just ran. 5 gunshots. One mother fighting for life, and a missing teenager who would soon shock the very officers searching for her." This is the story of the night Galveston will never forget. Welcome to True Crime Story Videos. Every face you'll see here once had dreams, laughter, and people who loved them. But somewhere along the way, their stories went silent. I'm Detective Daniel, and here we give those stories a voice again. Before we begin, take a moment, tell me your name and where you're watching from. Right after those 5 shots echoed through the night, the whole street changed. People who were just coming home from work stopped cold. They didn't even breathe. They knew the sound, and they knew it meant danger. One neighbor said they were walking up the steps after a long day.
Then all the police.
When those 5 gunshots hit the air like firecrackers from hell, they froze right where they stood. Every shadow suddenly felt wrong. Another neighbor was inside their kitchen, warming up dinner, when the shots blasted through the walls. They said the sound hit so hard it felt like the world shook. They didn't run. They didn't scream. They couldn't. Fear locked them in place. And all across the block, people slowly peeked out from behind blinds. In slow motion, you could see curtains move. People pulling the blinds only an inch. People inside their homes, trying to stay hidden but desperate to know what happened. They didn't want to be seen, and they didn't want to be next. And over all of it came the police radio chatter, the kind of sounds that mean something bad is happening and something worse might be coming. The fear spread fast. People didn't know who fired the shots. They didn't know where the shooter was. They didn't know if someone else was hurt. And for a moment, all anyone could hear was heavy breathing, quiet crying, and the crackle of police radios cutting through the night. The air felt tight, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath at the exact same time. A silence so thick it felt like it was pressing against every wall, every window, every heart on that street. And as police cars rushed in, lights flashing across mailboxes and front yards, one thing was clear: whoever fired those shots had just pulled this whole neighborhood into a nightmare. After the 5 shots, the street fell into a strange, scary quiet. But inside one home, a phone lit up. Someone had found the courage to call for help, and that call broke the silence. On the other end of the line, the 911 operator heard a voice shaking so hard it was almost hard to understand. There were gasps, broken words, and the sound of pure fear. The caller was trying to explain what they saw: a woman on the floor, blood, no movement, and no sign of the daughter. The operator tried to calm them, tried to keep them talking, tried to pull the truth out of the chaos. But fear was choking the neighborhood, and every second felt too long. Police units were sent out before the call was even finished. Sirens cut through the night like sharp blades, bouncing off the houses, waking up the block, grabbing the attention of anyone who wasn't already watching from behind a window. When the officers arrived, they didn't walk, they ran, straight to the front door, straight into the unknown. They stepped inside, and what they saw made the entire room feel smaller. Tia Moya Moore, a mother, was barely holding on. Her breaths were weak, her eyes were fading in and out. She was fighting to live. Officers radioed for EMS with voices that were firm but heavy. They knew time was almost gone. They knew every second mattered. They needed help fast, and then the EMTs rushed in. Fast steps, fast hands, fast voices. This wasn't calm. This wasn't quiet. This was a fight against the clock. A stretcher slammed through the doorway and into the living room. Bags opened. Gloves snapped. Lights shined on her face. They called out numbers. They called out commands. They did everything they could. Inside that home, the world felt like it was spinning. Officers searched rooms. EMTs pushed on with everything they had. And neighbors stood outside, holding each other, praying, crying, wondering how a warm September night turned into this nightmare. The stretcher moved fast out the door, wheels rattling, voices rising, a mother being rushed into the ambulance, her life hanging by a thread. And even as the ambulance pulled away, lights flashing through the dark, one terrible truth stayed behind. The mother was found, but the daughter was still missing. When officers stepped outside the house, the night felt colder than before. They had a mother fighting for her life, but the daughter, the one person who could explain anything, was nowhere to be found. The officers began to search the yard first, shining flashlights across the grass, checking behind cars, looking through every shadow. They called out. They moved fast, but there was nothing. No movement, no voice, no sign of her at all. It didn't take long for police to say the words out loud. The suspected shooter, the 16-year-old daughter, was gone. That news hit the neighborhood hard. A missing teenager after a shooting doesn't just create fear. It creates questions that shake people to their core. Was she running away? Was she hiding? Was she scared? Was she dangerous? No one knew, and not knowing made the night feel even darker. As officers walked door to door, neighbors barely cracked their doors open to speak. Most didn't want to step outside. Some whispered, some cried, some kept looking down the street hoping the girl would suddenly appear. But she didn't. The area around the house turned into a search zone. Flashlights crossed back and forth. Radios hummed with fast updates. Officers checked alleys, backyards, porches, corners, anything that might hide a frightened teen or a fleeing suspect. And with every minute that passed, the silence grew heavier. It wasn't just a missing person anymore. It was a mystery that no one was ready for. Police kept working. They checked streets leading out of the neighborhood. They scanned the sidewalks. They used their lights to sweep every inch of the block. The more they searched, the more shocking it became. It was as if she had vanished in seconds. The fear inside the neighborhood turned into quiet panic. People kept wondering the same thing. If she wasn't in the house and she wasn't on the street, then where could she be? As the search continued, officers talked quietly among themselves. They questioned how fast she could have moved. They wondered if someone picked her up. They considered every possibility, but each answer only raised more questions. And in moments like this, even the smallest detail becomes important. A door not fully closed, a gate pushed in, a sound behind a fence. Every little thing was checked. Every little thing mattered. Still, the truth was simple and terrifying. The girl was missing, and while officers worked, a new worry settled over the block. A missing teenager is one thing, but a missing teenager after a shooting? That creates a different kind of fear. A fear that sits heavy in your chest. A fear that makes you watch the street, even when nothing is there. For hours, the search continued. The lights stayed bright, the radios stayed loud, and the neighborhood stayed awake, waiting for answers that weren't coming. But what no one knew then, what no one could have guessed, was that this night still had one more surprise, one more twist, one moment that would leave officers stunned. Because the girl they were searching for, the one who vanished into the dark, the one they believed had run far away, would soon walk right back toward the very house she had left. And when she did, nothing about the case would ever feel simple again. Hour 1 ends here, with a mother fighting for life, a neighborhood frozen in fear, and a missing teenager about to return in a way no one expected. To understand how this night happened, we have to step back. We have to look behind the front door of this family's home. Because long before the gunshots, there was a story unfolding between a mother and her daughter, one that most people never saw. Relatives later described Tia Moya Moore as a woman who was trying, truly trying. She had faced hard years, made tough choices, and carried mistakes that followed her. But they say she was working to rebuild her life, piece by piece, day by day. They talked about a woman who loved her children more than anything, a mother who fought for a second chance, a mother who wanted to rise again,
even in the hard moments, even when money was tight, even when stress filled the house. She kept trying to turn things around. Her family said she had goals, real goals, a steady job, a softer heart, a clearer mind. They said she was finally stepping into a better chapter, a chapter she wanted her daughter to be part of. But behind closed doors, life was not simple. Single motherhood rarely is. Tayamoya carried the weight of bills, work, long nights, early mornings, and a daughter who was growing fast and feeling her own storms. The tension between them didn't appear out of nowhere. It grew slowly, the way pressure always does, inside the silence, inside the arguments, inside the exhaustion that never seemed to go away. Relatives described moments of love and moments of struggle. They talked about hugs in the kitchen, laughter on good days, and then days where the house felt tight, heavy, and too small for two people trying to survive their own battles. People said the daughter loved her mom, but she was also a teenager facing her own fears, her own anger, her own confusion, and sometimes those feelings clashed with the rules at home, the stress in the air, and the pressure that neither of them knew how to talk about. Neighbors said they heard the ups and downs. Sometimes the house sounded full of life, sometimes it sounded like two people who didn't know how to meet in the middle, and this is where the story becomes harder to hold, because behind every door in that home, there were emotions building, a mother trying to stand back up, and a daughter trying to understand her own world. The truth is simple and heartbreaking. Families can love each other deeply and still hurt in ways no one sees. They can share the same home and still feel far apart. They can want the best for each other and still lose their way in the pressure. And on this street, in this house, behind these doors, the pressure grew until something finally snapped. As we move deeper into this story, we step into a home full of hope, stress, love, fear, and everything in between. A home where a mother tried to rebuild her world and a daughter struggled to understand hers. And somewhere inside that storm, the night took a turn no one could have predicted. To understand the daughter's world, we have to step into a place most people never saw, the pressure she carried every day. Because before the night shattered this home, this teenager was already facing storms of her own. She was a student, trying to keep up with classes, homework, rules, and expectations. People close to the family said school hadn't been easy for her, grades were slipping, focus was fading, and every new assignment felt heavier than the last. She worried about being judged, she worried about falling behind, she worried about not being good enough. And when a teenager feels that kind of weight, it doesn't always show on the outside, but it grows inside, quietly, day after day. Friends say she struggled to fit in sometimes. The wrong crowd here, the wrong advice there, misunderstandings that turned into arguments, friendships that felt strong one week and broken the next. Being a teenager means trying to find your place in the world, and for her that place seemed to keep shifting. One minute she felt connected, the next minute she felt alone. That kind of emotional swing hits hard, especially when home life is already full of stress. There were moments when she didn't feel heard, moments when she felt misunderstood, moments when she didn't know how to say what she was feeling, or how to ask for help. And sometimes silence becomes the loudest part of a young person's life. She was not a villain, she was not a monster, she was a teenager dealing with pressure that she didn't know how to handle. Pressure from school, pressure from friends, pressure from life. An emotional strain can push anyone to a breaking point when they feel trapped with no clear way out. People who knew her said she carried a kind heart, but a heavy mind. They saw signs of stress, moments where she seemed overwhelmed, moments where her emotions ran ahead of her ability to control them. None of this excuses what happened, but it helps us understand the world she lived in. A world that felt confusing, a world that felt tight, a world where every day brought another challenge she didn't feel ready for. And while her mother was trying to rebuild her own life, the daughter was trying to understand hers. Two people living under the same roof, both fighting their own battles, both hurting in ways neither fully knew how to explain. No one can point to one moment or one reason. There is no easy answer here, only context. Only the truth that pressure, when it goes unseen, can grow into something dangerous, something heartbreaking. And in this case, that pressure was building long before the night of the gunshots. In the days before the gunshots, neighbors began noticing small changes around the house. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, but enough to feel different. Some talked about hearing raised voices behind the walls, short arguments, quick bursts of anger. A door shut too hard. A tense silence that followed. The kind of sounds that make people pause for a moment and then go back to what they were doing, hoping it's nothing serious. Others said the mother and daughter seemed distant, not walking together like before, not laughing the way they once did. Something felt off, like two people living in the same home but on different islands. Neighbors saw the mother come home looking exhausted, carrying the weight of long days and long nights. They saw the daughter moving quickly, keeping her head down, disappearing into the house without saying much. Two lives running on different tracks, slowly pulling farther apart. People noticed tension in the small things too. A sharp tone in the driveway, a cold silence at the mailbox, a feeling in the air like the home was holding a storm inside it. And the truth is, storms don't always start with lightning. Sometimes they start with whispers, tiny cracks, unspoken worries, and moments that fade too quickly for anyone to understand. In this home, the cracks grew quietly, day by day, argument by argument, emotion by emotion, a mother trying to rebuild her life, and a daughter trying to hold on to hers. No one outside the walls knew how deep the tension really ran. No one knew how heavy the pressure had become, and no one knew how close everything was to breaking. Looking back, neighbors can remember the signs, the quiet arguments, the heavy silence, the uneasy energy that hung in the air. But at the time, it all felt like normal family stress, nothing more. Yet something was building, something strong, something dangerous, something that was getting ready to break free. And as the days passed, that quiet tension kept growing. No one knew that within days, the world inside that house would explode. To understand this night, we have to return to the moment everything broke, the moment the teen walked back into the house. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air is warning you that something is about to go wrong. She opened the door and stepped inside. The house was still, lights low. Every sound seemed louder. A breath, a footstep, a heartbeat. It was a simple walk through a familiar home, but her mind was not calm. Everything inside her was tight, confused, emotional, a storm building behind her eyes. No one knows every word spoken in that room. No one knows the exact moment tension turned into danger. But what we do know is that there was pain on both sides. A mother fighting to guide her child. A teenager fighting feelings she didn't understand. Two worlds clashing in the same small space. And in that storm, something snapped. In a flash, the moment turned deadly. Anger, fear, confusion. It all collided at once. It didn't build slowly. It didn't fade in. It hit like lightning. And then came the sound that changed everything. 5 gunshots. 5 shots that ripped through the house, each one louder than the last. 5 shots that echoed so hard the whole neighborhood felt it. 5 shots that turned a normal night into a nightmare. Neighbors later said the sound shook their walls. Some thought it was fireworks. Others thought it was something worse. And inside that house, those 5 shots marked the exact moment a family fell apart. The mother fell. The room filled with panic. Everything that had been building for days, for weeks, exploded in those few terrible seconds. No one outside knew what had happened yet. No one inside could take it back. The storm had broken, and the echo of those 5 shots would follow this case forever. Now that we've reached the center of the story, we need to break down what we know about those 5 gunshots. The shots witnesses said they heard, one after another, sharp and clear in the night. Police confirmed that the mother, Ting Chamoya Moore, suffered multiple gunshot wounds. They didn't give the exact number right away. But neighbors, the people who were closest to the sounds, kept saying the same thing. I heard 5 shots, 5 echoes, 5 blasts that matched the pain found inside the home. The house itself tells part of the story. It's a small, tight space, the kind where every sound bounces off the walls. When the officers walked in, they found the mother in the main room near the kitchen. From the marks on the floor and the way the scene was laid out, it looked like the shots were fired from only a few feet away. In simple terms, this wasn't a long-distance shooting. This wasn't random. This was close, in the same room, in the same breathing space. Ballistics help us understand what that means. When a gun is fired from close range, the sound hits the walls harder, the force spreads through the house faster, and the injuries show clear patterns. Patterns investigators are trained to read. In this case, the wounds lined up with what witnesses reported. 5 shots, fired quickly, one right after another. Investigators also looked at the bullet paths. They checked the walls, the floor, the furniture. They followed the damage to see where each shot went, where it entered, where it stopped. And the pattern was simple. All the shots stayed inside the same small area. None were fired wildly. None hit distant rooms. Everything happened in one place. That place was the heart of the home, the space where the mother stood. Only steps from the kitchen counter, only feet from the front room. A space where normal family moments happen. A space that suddenly became the center of a tragedy. Police believed the mother was standing or moving slightly when the shots were fired. The angle of the bullet marks suggested she may have tried to turn, or step back, or protect herself in the split second. Everything happened, but it all unfolded too quickly. 5 pieces of ballistic evidence pointing to one single moment, a burst of violence that ended as fast as it began. Every detail inside that house told the same story, a close-range shooting, in one room in a matter of seconds, a mother hit multiple times, a teenage daughter the only other person inside, and a neighborhood that heard the truth before they even knew it, in the sound of those 5 terrible blasts. Right after the 5 gunshots, the house fell silent. No yelling, no footsteps, no calls for help. Just a stillness so deep it made the air feel heavy. And in that silence, the teen slipped out of the house and vanished into the night. She didn't wait for neighbors to come outside. She didn't wait for police. She didn't stay beside her mother. Instead, she left the scene in the minutes right after the gunfire. Minutes that became the most mysterious part of this entire story. No one saw exactly which way she went. No one heard her running down the street. There were no slammed doors, no cries, no sound of someone racing away. It was as if she simply disappeared into the darkness. And this is where the questions begin. Did she panic and run without thinking? Did she freeze first, then bolt when the fear hit her? Did she walk away slowly, confused and scared, not knowing what to do next? What happened in those silent minutes after the gunshot stopped? Those minutes matter. They hold the emotional truth of the moment, the shock, the fear, the confusion. The reality of a teenager standing in the middle of something too big to understand, then making a choice that no one expected. Police later found no clear trail, no footprints worth following, no neighbors who saw her pass by, no doorbell cameras catching her movement. It was like she slipped into the night and let the darkness hide her. But the mystery wasn't just about where she went. It was about why. Why leave the home? Why leave her mother? Why step into the night alone, with no plan and nowhere to go? Fear, shock, guilt, confusion, or something deeper, something she couldn't explain? The hours after a crime are full of clues, but in this case, the first clue walked away in silence, and that silence makes the story even harder to understand. Police searched the block, they checked the yards, they swept the shadows with bright flashlights. But the teenager was gone, gone before they even arrived, gone before anyone could ask a single question. And what makes this moment so haunting is that she didn't stay gone, because later, after the chaos, after the search, after the panic, she would come back to the very place she left. And no one, not the officers, not the neighbors, not even the people who knew her best, could have predicted the way she would return. As police searched the neighborhood, the last thing anyone expected was for the missing teenager to come back. Officers were moving house to house, lights flashing, radios calling out updates, when suddenly, everything shifted. In the middle of the chaos, she appeared, walking. Not running, not hiding, not trembling, just walking down the street toward the very house she had left behind. It was the kind of moment that doesn't feel real at first. Officers froze, neighbors stepped back, the air changed, because the person they had been trying to find, the person at the center of the shooting, was calmly returning to the scene. There was no shouting, no fear on her face, no sign she was trying to escape. She walked with slow steps, steady steps, almost quiet steps, like she wasn't coming back to a crime scene, but simply heading home after a long night. Officers were stunned by the calm. They expected panic. They expected crime. They expected anything but this quiet, steady walk through flashing lights and police tape. One officer stepped forward carefully, unsure what she might do next. But she didn't resist. She didn't argue. She didn't run. She stopped when they asked her to stop. She listened when they told her to stay still. In that moment, the neighborhood went silent. People watched from their windows, shocked. A teenager who had vanished into the night was now standing calmly in the glow of police lights, surrounded by officers who could hardly believe what they were seeing. The return raised more questions than answers. Why come back? Why now? Why this calm? What was going through her mind as she walked down that street toward the house that had just changed her life forever? Her quiet return became the most unexpected twist of the night, a moment that left even experienced officers unsure what would happen next. When the teenager stopped in front of the house surrounded by flashing lights and stunned officers, the next step became clear. She had to be taken into custody. Even though she was only 16, the law still had rules, and those rules had to be followed. Juvenile arrests work differently from adult arrests. Everything moves slower, more controlled, more careful. Officers are trained to keep things calm. They avoid pressure. They avoid force unless absolutely needed. They speak softly. They guide instead of push. Because with minors, minors.
something like
The
this
goal is
happen in a
safety
place so
first,
familiar?
and on this night the
In a home
process
they passed
unfolded
every
with an
day,
almost
in a
eerie
family
quiet.
they thought was doing the best they could. In Galveston, the story didn't just stay at the scene. It spread through kitchens, schools, churches, grocery stores, and front porches. Everywhere people gathered, the conversations were the same: shock, worry, disbelief. And beneath all of it was a quiet, heavy sadness, a feeling that this was more than a crime. It was a tragedy that wrapped itself around an entire community, leaving questions nobody knew how to answer. And as the city tried to make sense of what happened, one thing was clear: this case didn't just break a family, it broke the heart of Galveston. As the shock settled over Galveston, investigators stepped in. Their job was simple to explain but difficult to do. They needed to rebuild the entire night, second by second, what happened, when it happened, and how they could be sure. Detectives started with the home itself, every room, every angle. They looked for fingerprints, footprints, and anything the gunfire left behind. Forensics is like reading a story written in small pieces, pieces left on walls, floors, and objects that don't lie. They examined the bullet paths, where each shot started, where each one ended. They noted the direction, the height, the distance. By doing that, they could tell where the shooter stood and where the mother was when the shooting began. Next came the timeline. Detectives used 911 calls, neighbor statements, phone records, and the physical evidence to line everything up: the 5 shots, the silence after, the teen leaving the house, the first officer arriving, the mother being rushed out on the stretcher. Every step had to be placed in order, and the pattern was clear. The gunshots happened fast. The teen left the scene soon after. The mother was found alive but fading. The teen returned hours later, calm and quiet. This is how investigators built the truth, not from guesses, but from moments that matched the evidence. They photographed everything, collected everything, measured everything. Forensic teams moved slowly through the home, treating every inch like it mattered, because in cases like this, it always does. And as the investigation grew, one fact remained in the center of it all: a mother was shot multiple times, and the only other person in the home was her daughter. With the evidence they gathered, detectives began forming the questions that would lead them into the final phase of the case, the phase where answers are rare and truth is harder to hold. Once detectives finished gathering the evidence, they faced the hardest part of the entire story: the why. Why would a teenager be connected to a moment this violent? Why would a family fall apart in seconds? And why did this tragedy happen inside a home already trying to heal? There is no single answer, no single motive anyone can point to. Investigators looked at the mother-daughter relationship. They looked at the stress in the home. They looked at school struggles, friend problems, emotional pressure, but nothing led to one clean explanation. It was a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit neatly together. Psychological experts were brought in to help understand the emotional side. They explained that teenagers often deal with pressure differently from adults. They can feel stress deeply, but hide it well. Small problems can turn into big storms. Feelings can grow faster than they can control. And when home life is already heavy, those storms can become overwhelming. These experts didn't excuse the act. They didn't justify it. They simply tried to help investigators understand the emotional weight a young mind might carry, weight that can lead to breaking points adults don't always see coming. Then came the legal side. Because the suspect is just 16, juvenile justice rules take over. The court does not share her name. The records stay sealed. The hearings are protected. The goal is not only punishment, but understanding and rehabilitation, especially in cases where mental and emotional strain may have played a role. A juvenile case does not move fast. It moves carefully. Judges look at age, history, mental health, family life, and every detail surrounding the event. They must decide whether the teen stays in the juvenile system, or if the case becomes serious enough to consider moving her to adult court. But even with all this work, the investigation, the experts, the evidence, there are questions that still have no answers, questions that linger, questions that haunt. This is a case shaped by fear, pressure, confusion, and heartbreak. And even after everything investigators uncovered, it remains a case with more questions than answers. As the investigation slowed and the town tried to move forward, the memories of that night never faded. They stayed in the streets. They stayed in the homes. They stayed in the voices of the people who heard the first signs of tragedy. One neighbor remembered coming home from work, hearing 5 sharp gunshots cut through the quiet. They said that moment still plays in their mind every night before they sleep. Another neighbor remembered standing in the kitchen, frozen in fear when the sound blasted through the walls. They said they didn't move for almost a minute, afraid they might be next. And those memories, those quick flashes of fear and confusion, became part of the story that Galveston will never forget. In the days that followed, people gathered outside the house with candles and flowers. A small memorial grew at the front gate. Pictures, messages, crosses, soft lights glowing in the night. It became a place for the community to hold their grief, a place to honor a mother who was trying to rebuild her life, and a family that broke apart too fast for anyone to understand.
Parents brought their children to the memorial. Neighbors held hands. Teachers stood quietly. The street that once felt normal now felt like a memory itself, a reminder of how quickly life can change. And every time the wind moved the flowers or flickered the candles, people said they felt the weight of those 5 gunshots all over again.
In the end, this story is not just about evidence, timelines, or investigations. It's about the people left behind, the people who loved the mother, the people who cared for the teen, the people who will forever wonder if something could have changed the path that led to that night. In the end, a mother is gone, a teenager's life is changed forever, and a community is left searching for answers in the echo of 5 gunshots in the Texas night.